Let's see that should. Yep, there we go. Cool. All right, everybody, welcome to the 54 podcast. Today we have our usual Chase Fry, comedian, actor, and everything in between. We have Jonathan Suarez, local musician, who was on the podcast before, and he's joining us again.
Why not?
And how would you like me to introduce you, man? Just out of curiosity.
John Katana from Cielo Mystic.
All right. So I guess he already did the work himself. He just introduced himself.
Easy job.
Cielo Mystic. Basically, I mean, if you want to give the audience a rundown, basically, of what it is that you do, you know, how the store and everything that you, your daily operations as a whole, you know, you're more than welcome
First
to.
of all, guys, I'm very happy to be here. I'm John. I am the founder of Cielo Mystic, and I'm a local Union City business owner. I've been working in Union City since I was about 16 years old when I started my first shop. Now, my humble business has become 4 separate locations, and we're growing day by day. So, yeah, I'm very excited to be part of the podcast. I'm excited to share wisdom. I'm excited to learn, and I'm really excited to get to know you guys.
All right. It sounds great, man. And so just to kind of like get started, what is it that you guys, do at the shop, and what are the services that you guys offer at the shop?
Sure, yeah. Well, Cielo Mystic is a metaphysical shop located in Union City, uptown Union City, and we focus on helping the community find a safe environment to practice the mystical arts. There's a lot of schools out there, and there's a lot of spiritual shops, but very few of those places can claim to be both. So Cielo Mystic is a jewelry store, it's a perfume shop, it's a crystal shop, we've got custom jewelry, we do dry herbs, we have a variety of products that range from essential oils to metaphysical tools that you might need for your practice. And more recently, we've been starting a new venture, establishing a school of mystic arts that's going to focus on teaching people metaphysics and tarot and yoga and anything in the nature of mystery school. So we're really excited. We've got this new branch called the School of Mystic Arts, and this is about 2 weeks old right now. And we're really looking forward to seeing how we could build this community.
And I can see that, yeah, you have the studio behind you. You're moving up in the world. You got the space already. So things are looking up. I mean, we're all creators and people, trying to move ahead in the community here. So it's nice to see that somebody's, we're all kind of seeing progression amongst each other.
So I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday when we did our introduction, John. But could you just give us like an insight how you got started with all this mystic arts stuff, with all this?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Cielo Mystic started. I think most great things start in a really dark place, and I see that quite a bit. Cielo Mystic started when my father passed away. I think I was about 15 years old, and I started to really question what it means to be spiritual, if there's life after death, if what happens when we die and when we're no longer here. Those questions really start to open you up to a new world, and I guess the hope that there might be something after we've left. That hope is possibly the bread and butter to Cielo Mystic. At the time, Cielo Mystic wasn't called Cielo Mystic. It used to be called Tercer Cielo, which is my mom's company. That it's a spiritual organization that focuses on helping low-income Hispanic communities develop themselves emotionally, get through alcoholism, domestic violence issues, eviction issues. It's basically a consultation branch that eventually became Cielo Mystic when we started incorporating the English community. And now we've been established for about 8 years from Cielo Mystic and 30 years from Tercer Cielo. And the reason why it started was because we realized that the spirituality was growing, and we realized that there was a lot of people that were becoming part of that New Age movement, but there wasn't really any formal structure established to guiding people and in the metaphysical community. There was just like small niches small groups that would pop in here and there. And we felt that without like a proper foundation, without a proper structure, the spiritual community would cease to grow at one point or would continue being a cult. And that was kind of our mission, to bring out to light spirituality that for a long time has been a cult. And for a good reason, they've called it occultism. They call it the occult. And it's hidden. It's been hidden for so long. But two things have changed the last 20 years. One, the internet. Having the internet available and having people have the internet available to them has allowed them to have all the metaphysical wisdom they could possibly imagine at their fingertips if they so choose to look it up. And two, the bringing of Harry Potter. Harry Potter being established as a worldwide movie, and that the effect that that's had on the youth 20 years later, who are now growing up, getting older, and starting businesses and deciding that, hey, maybe this whole Harry Potter thing doesn't have to be a fantasy.
Right.
Yeah. So what about Harry Potter specifically do you think? What's drawn you to this conclusion?
Well, I remember watching Harry Potter, and I remember seeing like all the problems that they had. It was like Muggles versus wizards, and wizards separate from Muggles, and the two can't know about each other, and they can't relate to each other. And I always disliked that division. I felt that if there's something that can succeed, it has to succeed with unity. So there could be Muggles and there could be wizards, but why can't they be both at the same time? And I also grew up in a household. My mom is a medium. She's a spiritual guide and a medium. She's been doing that for my whole life. So whereas a lot of kids would watch Harry Potter and they would be told, hey, that's just a fantasy, it's a movie, it stays there. I wasn't told that. I was told it was real. And I was convinced that it was real. I was waiting for my letter that I never got. And I guess that was one of the things that really made me sad as I grew up, and I realized, wow, this world that I am so in love with doesn't really exist. And so I decided, hey, why don't I change that?
Mm. And
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Chase.
Oh, I was just gonna touch on your mom really quick. So you said she's a medium, and obviously that's like, I think it's fair to say, has like sort of influenced you towards this like Cielo mystic past. Would you say that's fair to say? That she's sort of like, yeah.
Definitely. I come from a very I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So at 16, I wasn't really given a choice. A lot of kids, at 16, they go and they get their first job. I came from an environment where at 16, you grow up and you get your first business. Yeah. And I guess I was given a lot of freedom as to what I could do with my time. And I was given motivation and push, and I was given so much support when it came to establishing my business. And when it came for me to decide what I wanted to do, I decided to continue my mom's business, which was interesting to me. I started like at 15, 16, I would take the train to New York to stock up on merchandise. I would buy incense and oils and herbs and statues and figures, and I would bring them back in like briefcases and suitcases full of merchandise. I developed relationships with these older manufacturers that was like, you see a 16-year-old boy walk in with a suitcase. He's like, oh crap, okay, I guess I'm selling to this kid. This kid walks in with $500 and a suitcase. You're not going to say no to him. So I started my business that way. My mom had her connections, and I kind of moved forward with those relationships, and I continued the relationships that we had with them, eventually starting my own business as a result of it, as an extension to hers.
Right. And where would you say that your mom's where did she receive her teachings, or how was she taught about her ideologies, essentially?
It's a good question. It's actually really interesting, the story of Diana. And I call her Diana because in the way that I see it, the way I perceive it, Diana is the character that she channels when she does her practice. and my mom is my mom, but Diana is the person that she becomes the vessel to Diana, the spirit.
I see.
And her upbringing started very spiritual. Like in our village in Mexico, there are certain people that are chosen to be like the village healers, and simply by like a birthmark or a mannerism or maybe even like a lineage, they're chosen to be like the spiritual healers. So at a very young age, like around the age of 3 or 5, my mom was chosen to be the spiritual healer of her community, and she was taken in by a midwife. Like we didn't really have that many hospitals back then, so like you would be born in the same house where you would live, and she had little hands. So they would use her little hands to help give birth to the ladies of the village, and that's kind of really how she started her reputation. She would like when somebody was about to give birth, the midwife would come pick her up, and they would go and they would help deliver the child, and yeah, that's how it started. She was literally a kid helping kids be born, and that was very interesting, to hear those stories growing up and seeing how that progress led her to where she is today.
And you've also mentioned as well that you're Jewish as well. Is that what side of the family is that from again?
Well, to be Jewish, you can only be Jewish through your mother. Right. It's not the Jewish lineage can only be passed down from mother to offspring.
Right.
And it's a matriarchal society, so that can only come from my mom.
Okay.
And what's very interesting about being Jewish and being Mexican, which at times is kind of like an oxymoron.
Yeah,
it's that we didn't actually know. We didn't actually know we were Jewish for a long time. My mom had her mother, right, and it was a long time before she realized my grandmother's full name. My grandmother lost a lot of her Jewish tradition, and the little bits that she gave my mom were splattered all over the place. But when she realized my grandma's full name, and then she realized her full name as a result of that, we looked into it and we realized that there was more in our family that was Jewish. There was more to our family than just Mexican.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of started us on a collective journey to understand Judaism and how that we never really fit in with Catholicism. And Buddhism was there too, and Mormonism was there at one point as well. But Judaism seemed to be the one thing that connected with all of us. And I guess that's when we decided to collectively pursue that. That was probably about 10 years ago. And as a family, we decided that, hey, this is kind of what we're drawn to.
So how do you?
There's.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't
No, tell me.
No, I was wondering, like, how do you, now that you've basically been exposed to the world of Judaism, how do you consolidate the Judaic beliefs with the mystic side of your life?
Well, they're actually they complement each other very well. If you understand how profound Judaism is, it's a lot of people have the misconception that being Jewish is only being Hasidic, or only being an Ashkenazi Jew, and that is a big misconception. There are black Jews, there are white Jews, there are Hispanic Jews, there are Asian Jews, and I think that throughout the generations, we've forgotten that the original Jews were actually black, and so that really kind of opened my eyes. There's a group of Jews that started what we now know as the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is it's a phrase. It means to pass on, or to give, or to receive. And the Kabbalah is it's a concept that originates from Spain, from which my family originates as well. And the Kabbalah is a Jewish practice, even though it's a Spanish practice as well. And the group of Jewish people that practice Kabbalah and that originate Kabbalah are called Sephardic Jews. Not a lot of people know about Sephardic Jews, and even less people know that the Sephardic Jews have a language called Ladino, which is a form of Hebrew Spanish. It's very interesting. Spanish Jews have their own language, they have their own culture, they have their own system of beliefs, and it reflects Hasidic Judaism, although it's not completely Orthodox Judaism.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of exists in its own bubble, I would say, or at least separate from everything else.
Definitely. Yeah.
Chase, you look like you want to ask something.
I have 1,000,001 questions for you, but I just I'm so interested. Some are going to be a little off topic as we go along, if that's all right with you.
Go for it, man.
I want to know my first question is, I notice you're wearing a necklace right now.
Oh yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, I've always been into really avant-garde pieces. My first piece was a medallion that I made that was 3 inches wide. It was the 7 keys, the 7 keys of Solomon. It was the 7 archangels of Solomon, mm-hmm. And this one is it's an obelisk. It's a garnet obelisk that was wrapped in the shop, handmade by Jasmine, my partner there, and it's usually used for a meditation or possibly for a chakra alignment. It's not really used as a pendant, but I decided that why not make it into a pendant? But the piece is probably over 2 inches, so it's bigger than your average pendant, and I like pieces that stand out. So that's that piece. Yeah, definitely stands out. And I think when you see somebody walking with a huge crystal shard, it kind of tells you a little bit about where they are in their life.
Right. Well, John,
it's a conversation starter, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, I was also saying Jonathan's rocking one too.
Yeah. That's actually
since we haven't touched upon it, Jonathan, do you want to say how you know John here, how you guys met and why your relationship is so important?
All right. Well, I was in 8th grade, and I was living in Union City at the time, and my mom ended up meeting John's mom, and my mom ended up asking me one weekend, "Hey, do you want to work?" And I said yeah, being a little 13-year-old that wanted to make some money. And I ended up being introduced to John at the market, and we started working together. And then it went from having just carts to 2 carts to end up having a store. And it's it was weird because it would be one weekend we're here, and then the next we're here, and then the next we have our own shop, and then we're there at the shop for a while, and John is out doing John things, and I'm there at I'm the youngest person in this entire store of more stores and shit, and just working. It grew very quickly. I feel like the community was starving for something like that. Mm-hmm. So in hindsight, the growth that it had, it makes more sense now, and the growth that I call it the Cielo Mystic project, the growth that project continues to have is a result of the spiritual hunger that people have. And it was like Jonathan said, it started in a mini market, a little mini market in Union City on 45th Street in Bergen Line, which had a bunch of little stands and a couple shops.
Yeah,
no bigger than 500 square feet.
Yeah, kind of
like a flea market. It was a flea market, And we started with 1 table, and that became 2 tables and 3 tables. And within 6 months, it became a shop, and then 2 shops. And by a year and a half, it was 2 shops, and it was a structure. There was something to work off there.
It was funny being that young. And mind you, I was working with him, and I'm probably the most atheist person in the whole fucking all of Union City, working with spirituality, not really understanding anything of what's going on, just knowing that I have an objective, and that objective was to sell something.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. In hindsight, the knowledge probably would have been a lot better, considering
a lot more valuable.
Knowing I could fucking sell, but.
Right.
And knowing what I'm selling, but also developing the spiritual side of who I am. So.
Jonathan, can I ask you this? Working with John, I know you just said you were atheist, but working with John, how has that helped or changed or influenced your spiritual development? Like, where did that guide you to?
Well, I think having a guide is only acceptable as a guide if you accept it as a guide. I don't. Yeah.
Okay.
At the time when I met him, up until a couple months ago, my beliefs in spirituality were very minimal. I didn't really believe in anything, and I had several existential crises almost like every other month, considering like, what is life? Like, where do we go from here? Do I believe what the Christians are telling me about this man who can make water into wine, or do I believe people who believe in Buddha and their beliefs, or like, there's just so many different religions that the idea of unity between them didn't make sense until recent, when I came to my own self-discovery. Now, realizing that I made that discovery when I was 8 years old, watching a video on YouTube that kind of explained everything to me, and then it blowing my mind. Yeah, shout out Spirit Science.
Spirit Science, for sure. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Being an atheist and meeting John, that was it was quite a big contradiction. Yes.
So a Jew and an atheist walk into a bar, and you know what, guys? It's interesting that Jonathan tells, the way he's explaining it it's really interesting, because it takes being in a dark place. Like the human has to be in a dark place in order to find or to try to seek some form of light. And that is really what the Kabbalah is. The Kabbalah is to receive light. So you will not be in the place to look for light unless you are in a dark place. And that's what you're going to see reflecting in everyone's spiritual journey. They are in a dark place. They are living throughout this hard experience, and they have decided that now they want to see more from the world by pursuing spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not even just the world. It's literally everything else. Like, everything has a meaning after that. For me, at least, that's what it felt like. Everything worked in a sequence. Everything was something. And there was no coincidence. Coincidences are just thrown out the window, and you kind of realize and you kind of accept everything for what it is. And in turn, it made me happier with everything, because I didn't have to worry about, well, what comes after death. The what comes after death is what happens, but I want to enjoy right now. Right now was the most important thing to me since I started accepting these things.
Yeah. So I think that it's really easy for people who grow up with Catholic parents, or with, Muslim parents, or with Jewish parents, or whatever, to sort of like be like, yeah, I'm Jewish, that's what I am, and sort of throw the religion to the side. And I know you've touched on it a little bit, discovering that you're, have this Jewish part in your past, and you have this, like, all that, but what in you, like, didn't let you throw that aside? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
I get you for sure. It's very interesting, because I didn't grow up Jewish. I didn't realize I was Jewish until I was probably about 15 years old. Right. And, being 15 and just discovering that you're Jewish, it's a very different experience, because, I've met a lot of Jewish Hasidic people in my time, because one of the businesses that we have is a testing center. And a lot of Jewish people don't go to traditional school. They get homeschooled, they go through Yeshiva, and then they go and they get their GED and they get their diploma. So they would end up coming to us to get their diploma, and I would talk to them. They would be my students, and I would get to know how they've lived their life being Jewish. And it's funny, because when you grow up Jewish, and it's something that is by default, you don't really value it as much. You're like, yeah, I'm Jewish, it's what I do, it's what we do. There are some people, obviously, that really embrace it, but there's a good percentage of people that, like, you know what, I'm Jewish, I guess, whatever, I don't really care. And I'm over here is like, whoa, you're Jewish? You mean you got a bar mitzvah? You mean you've got this whole tradition? You get to celebrate Passover, and you get to get the days off for the prayer, and you get to do all this stuff. And I'm like, yo, that's so cool. They're like, yeah, whatever, I guess,
We
And
actually briefly touched upon that about how some of the people in the Jewish community actually have more atheistic beliefs, but still practice the Jewish traditions within their family. Like I know a lot of people that are Jewish, and for whatever reason, or not for whatever reason, but they still have this kind of like agnostic leaning personality, and they simply just follow the traditions of their faith.
there's a reason for that. You know, in Judaism, there is a Jew and there is a Gentile.
Right.
Do you guys know what that is?
Yeah, Gentile.
You know
Yeah,
Jew.
yeah.
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 Yeah, anybody who's not a Jew is a Gentile.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So you know, right off the bat, you get this divisive mindset. It's like, okay, we're the Jews, and those are the Gentiles, and we're different from them. So we're going to set up our own schools, and we're going to set up our own communities, and we're going to set up our own businesses, and we're only going to buy from our businesses, and we're going to set up our own foods, which are kosher or parve, and we're only going to eat those foods. And you develop a community within the community, which is great. It's amazing. It's actually really healthy mindset if you do it right. And I personally advocate for communities of all races to embrace that mindset. But the divisiveness starts when they start to think we are better than you guys because we're God's chosen people. And that mindset, that's when it becomes dangerous. Jewish people have a long history of oppression. Jewish people have a long history of violence onto them. And I think that has definitely contributed to how divisive they are, and I completely understand why, you know. But like I always have a joke when people ask, you know, about Judaism. It's like Moses and his people did not travel 40 days and 40 nights through the desert and come out white. You know, that's not. You don't go through the desert for that long and end up white. Jewish people are not just Hasidic. There are 12 tribes. Well, actually, if you ask me, there are 13 tribes. But if you ask a Hasidic Jew, there's only 12, because they don't consider the tribe of Levi part of the tribes. The tribe of Levi, I believe, is what we know as the Hasidic Jews. The Hasidic Jewish people, in from my studies, I've determined that the Hasidic Jewish people are the Levites. They're one fraction of the Jewish collective, but there are 12 other tribes that are not the Hasidic Jews.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the tribe of Benjamin and the tribe of Dan. You know, all these tribes, Naphtali and Shimeon. And funny enough, my sister belongs to the tribe of Shimeon. Her father is generations of Shimeons, and he's black. He's Haitian, you know. So he has a Jewish name. It belongs to a Jewish tribe, and he to be black. Yeah.
So I'm gonna backtrack you here a little bit. Why don't they consider the tribe of Levi a tribe?
The tribe of Levi isn't considered a tribe because they don't have land. They weren't given any land. And I think if you understand Judaism, that right there is a huge puzzle piece to the conflicts that we're facing today with Jewish people. The tribe of Levi does not have a land. And the reason why they don't have land is because when they were chosen by Israel, the patriarchs of the original Israeli project, if I may, they were chosen to be the priest class. They were supposed to be the ones that were the priests for all the other tribes. All the other tribes got land in this body mass that they knew as Jerusalem, Israel. And each one of them got a section of Israel. But the tribe of Levi did not. The tribe of Levi embarked all of the tribes, was meant to hold all of the tribes together, and for that reason they were not given land, and they were not given anything to work on. The purpose of the tribe of Levi, the way that they survived, was through the tithe that the other tribes gave them. So you would not see a Levite in the field. You would not see a Levite as a merchant. you would not see a Levite as a king or a priest, or they would see them as a king. You would see them as a priest. They were the priest class. So it was the responsibility of the other tribes to bring offerings to the tribe of Levi, so that they could bring those offerings to God, and of course take their cut in the process.
Okay, so you said earlier that this has led to the current land disparagement in Israel. How so?
Well, the other tribes had land, and the Levites did not. So now we fast forward 5,000 years later, and the ones that are supposedly the only Jews, the Levites, don't have a land. Well, they've never had a land, and they've always fought for a land. And it wasn't until the Holocaust that happened in World War II that the United Nations decided to get together and establish a formal Israeli state. But that's a relatively new concept, because this land that is now being called Israel, which was called Israel a long time ago, but now is formally known as Israel, was shared by three groups since the beginning of these religions 5,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, since the beginning of Catholicism and Christianity. It was shared by the Islamics, the Muslims, by the Christians, and by the Jews. It was a three-way divide. But as of recently, it's been more leaning towards it being declared a Jewish land, which may or may not be the case.
And it causes conflict with, everybody is aware of the conflicts with Palestine, and how that's also been brewing basically since Israel was established as a actual official state. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I was just interjecting there. But Chase, I feel like you were going to follow that up, and I was just kind of...
before you guys do, I wanted to add one more thing, and I think this is an important detail to add. If you guys follow Judaism, and if you are interested in the Torah, I believe it was a Book of Kings, the fall of the Second Temple. Like, the Jewish people lost their ways many times. It wasn't just that they messed up a few times. They started worshiping idols. They started practicing things that they weren't supposed to be practicing according to the religion, and their temple fell twice. Their temple fell twice. They lost their throne twice. After the second time that they lost their throne, their God declared that they no longer deserved the land. The land was taken away from them. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that they lost it. They lost the privilege of that land because of some of the practices that they were doing. And that's very important to note, because now for them to claim that this land is theirs when they lost their privilege for this land a long time ago, it's kind of unfair.
Right.
Yeah. So can you actually, this is sort of a broad question, I guess, but could you describe the first temple to me? Because I've heard of it a little bit, but
yeah, of course I can. I'm happy you asked, man. It's because that right there is a very important question. A big part of my journey was also my affection towards Freemasonry. I'm a huge studier of Freemasonry. I love studying Freemasonry, and when I was a kid, coming from the background that I came from, and my mom being a medium, there was a lot of Freemasons that came to consult with her. And I was going to be a Freemason myself a long time ago. I decided not to, and I've committed to never committing to Freemasonry. But the reason why that's important is because if you've ever seen a Freemasonic temple, you have seen a modern rendition of the first Jewish temple. Okay. And the way that I would describe it to you, it's a huge building with a total of either 9 or 12 pillars. The front pillars are two huge pillars about 40 cubits high, one named Yashin and the other one named Boaz. And both of those pillars represent mercy and mercy and justice, or mercy and wisdom, or mercy and strength. It varies from culture to culture. And in the front of the temple, there was from the descriptions of it, the second temple, which was the second rendition, I believe this one was made. No, the first one. This one was made with King Solomon, who made the first temple. He established it with this figure known as Baal, 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 which is one of the Canaanite gods, which has the head of a bull. It's a statue made of gold. Now, the temple, or as some people call it, the Eastern Temple, was made up of gold. Gold doors, gold walls, gold floors, gold everything. Everything was gold. And when you would walk into the temple, there would be 3 entrances to get into the temple. There was one entrance for the Jews, right? There was a big entrance in the front that was for the Gentiles. There was a side door for the Jews, and there was a secret door for the kings. And it was in ranks. Only the kings can go through that door, and only Jews can go through the Jewish door, and everybody can go into the Gentile door. And that's how it was set up. You know, it'd be a place where you come, you bring your offerings, you bring your burning herbs, you bring your animals. If you've committed a sin, you have to donate your calf. It would kind of be like a community center for spirituality, where not only would you come to physically release, you would also come to spiritually release.
Deep.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So I'm actually going to switch the subject here just a little bit because I want to know about your interest in Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
What got you interested in that? Because that seems like such a switch from everything else.
Well, you'd be surprised that the reason why I'm so interested into Mesopotamian and Babylonian culture is because I don't believe that there's a division. I believe that there's a very, very thick line connecting the two. And if you ask me, there's in Kabbalah there's this concept known as the 72 names of God, and it's this belief that God had 72 names, different names in the Hebrew language, and those names were different emulations of God. And it's my personal belief that they omitted those names from the Bible and replaced all those names with Adonai, which means the Lord, Hashem, which means the name, or Yahweh, which is one of the gods. But I believe that at one point the original Bible had all 72 names inscribed into it. So where it now says God, it would actually speak about a specific form of God. Going back to your question about Babylonia and Mesopotamia, some of the stories are very reflective of each other. A patriarch God coming and creating the universe, earth, and creating the earth in his image and creating these beings that reflect their people to dig up gold to bring back to their atmosphere. I always felt there was a connection between the Anunnaki and the Adonai, the El Shaddai, the group of gods. And I never saw the Old Testament as a story of one God, but as a story of multiple gods interacting with humans. So my job as a spiritual worker has been to figure out how Mesopotamian culture connects to Judaism and Catholicism and Christianity. You know, in Babylonian mythology, you have this patriarch god called Anu, who sends seven of his people to Earth to populate the Earth and bring back gold. One of his sons, if I'm not mistaken, was Enki. If I'm correct, Enki decided that he wanted to create these humans in his image and gave them free will. Lucifer the light bearer is called Lucifer the light bearer because he bears fire. He gave humans the ability to use fire. And it has a strong connection to Enki, the original God that gave us the ability to think freely So I believe that those two stories not only complement each other, but are actually a continuation of each other. And the bridge between those two stories is a very special book that was taken out of the Bible, known as the Book of Enoch.
Okay, so could you actually explain the Book of Enoch for people who don't know?
The Book of Enoch. It's been a while since I've read it, so bear with me if I get a few things. Whoever looks into it, I have a link available to anybody who asks us from Cielo Mystic Instagram to the Book of Enoch, the whole text online for free. The Book of Enoch describes the journey of a tribe and a man, Enoch, ascending to become one of the archangels known as the Archangel Metatron. And he describes a land before the Torah, before the time that we see now. You see shades of the Noah story in it. You see shades of the Moses story. You see a lot of shades of like this messianic figure bringing his people out of darkness into light and being given grace by God. But one of the most important things that you note in the Book of Enoch is that it talks about multiple gods. It talks about giant beings known as Nephilim, which are characters that were created between humans and these gods. Giants, literally huge 70-foot tall giants that started, angels started intermingling with humans, and their creation was something called the Nephilim. The Nephilim being a huge giant that was an offspring of angel and human, it was considered an abomination by God. That story leads up to Noah's story of the Noah's Ark, of God deciding to cleanse the earth of all these beings that he deemed to be unholy. And that's really interesting because you see the connection of the Noah story of cleansing impurities with the Enoch story of angels intermingling with humans. And that is something that is worth looking into.
Yeah. So I actually heard a theory that the flood was to wipe out the Nephilim.
Yeah.
What credence do you give that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree that I believe that the Book of Enoch is it's before the Book of Genesis, and even the Book of Genesis is younger than people think it is. It has pieces of older books like the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a very, very, very old book. But yes, I do believe that angels, not angels like wings with halos floating in the sky, right. but angels like beings that exist in a different frequency, like beings that are physical, not in our perceivable frequency. Angels, beings that are perceivable in a higher frequency that we cannot physically perceive because of our own limitations. These beings are beings that make up the structure of the universe, and at the time they were given a lot of influence over how the universe works. So they intermingled with the humans, and they created something which was considered an abomination known as the Nephilim. And since then, like if you look at like temples in Peru, you see these massive sky temples with stairs that are like 3 meters long, where people have to make stairs on the side of those stairs because those stairs are so wide. For a long time, it was considered conspiracy theory and fake Photoshop photos of like massive skulls where like a whole human was the size of the nose of the skull that was found. And the reality of there being giant humanoid figures becomes more and more clear the more you look into it. So I believe that there were real massive beings, which are the ones that we know as the Anunnaki.
Yeah. So where do the Anunnaki tie in with the Nephilim? How is that? Are they the same thing? Are they?
That is the question. That is the the universal question. It could be they are the same thing, that they are the same beings. It could be that they are a genetically modified version of those beings mixed with us, or it could just be that they're the creation of those beings. But in all the stories, from Hanuman and Shiva in Hinduism, to some of the gods in Peru, to the sun god in Mexico, to the gods of Greek mythology, all of those refer to giant humanoid figures in the sky, coming and giving us the ability to create fire and astrology and astronomy. And even the Book of Enoch talks about how these, in order to procreate with us as a payment, the angels as a payment to procreating with humans, they gave us the knowledge of astrology and numerology and alchemy as a payment for us giving away our daughters.
It's an interesting concept. I forgot. Actually, Chase, go ahead because I forgot what I was about to ask. I was going to.
I thought you had a question, dude. I was waiting for you. I've been hogging up all the questions.
No, it's because I was going to relate.
This stuff has always interested me, so I could ask questions.
Right, no, I remember now. So I was actually going to ask about the giant humans that you referenced, or at least the giant beings, essentially. So you mentioned that there were images that people used to believe that were photoshopped, or at least a while ago. Which I've seen images like the ones that you referred to, and they're always usually referred to as just images that have been shopped or whatnot. Do you have where could I find those images that you were referring to? Essentially,
you could just Google Peru giants, and you're gonna see the gigantic steps, like huge steps in Peru. You could look.
Peru, right?
Yeah, Peru. You could look up. If you look up Peru giants in ancient Cusco, you're gonna find a lot of cool stuff. Looking at Peru giants on Google will definitely give you some results. Like heads that are the size of people. And they always seem to have these elongated skulls, which is very interesting because if you go back to Egyptian mythology and spirituality, you see the reference of elongated skulls, which I believe humans started to mimic as a homage to the old giants that naturally had those skulls.
Interesting. And do you hypothetically speaking, do you think that these beings are directly related to humans, or do you think there's some kind of separate entity altogether?
No, I think they have to be directly related to us. I think that if anything, we're related to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Joseph, go.
No, I was just saying the only reason I bring that up is because I guess the farther back you go in terms of the human fossil record, it actually seems that we get smaller. So that's why I was asking where those beings would fit in the archaeological record.
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, because you're asking the further back we go, the smaller we get, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is that our history, our spiritual history, is far older than we can possibly imagine. There were these beings here already.
Right.
There were these Neanderthals already developed from like apes, right? These creatures were already here. The Anu, these beings from space, if you may, came and found Neanderthals and found Homo erectus and played with their DNA to create modern Homo sapiens.
I see.
But it wasn't like those the archaeological history. It accurately depicts our biological history, but that gap between Neanderthal and Homo erectus and the combination of the two by a third party is what I believe created us.
Okay.
And so it does tie in there because those beings were there. They were alive. They were like hobbit-like figures.
Right.
They were all round.
Well, it's
But
interesting
they-
because there's different. And sorry to interrupt you, but there's different kinds of hypotheses as to how it is that essentially the modern Homo sapien came to be from the Neanderthals and from the early Homo erectus, and also the I believe it's called the Denisovans, which is another species of
Denisovans,
humans that we
yeah.
really don't know much about. But I mean that could be a very equal hypothesis to the ones that are also already prevalent. The other ones are simply that Homo erectus and eventually the Homo sapiens and the Neanderthals simply just interbred with one another, which is the reason that we also possess Neanderthal DNA. In certain individuals, you can find large portions of Neanderthal DNA within them in comparison to other people. But that's why I mentioned the larger beings, because in terms of if you look in our biological record, not just archaeological, but also in us, current modern humans, I was wondering where their trace would be essentially. In that
I think that intermingling part, that's where their trace would be.
Mm-hmm.
The connecting these three different forms of human together, and mixing them, matching them, taking things away, and bringing things together. I think that interaction would either be very hard for three different races to meet, or they were brought together by some third party. And who knows? We've got these stories that seem to connect to each other, and I feel like there's a reason for it. I'm certainly not denying that evolution plays a massive part in this.
No, right.
I believe that.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe that spirituality and evolution, the truth will be found within both.
Yeah.
So, why? Why do we have any clues in the ancient texts? Is there any leads, any theories on why the Anunnaki would do this? Is there or were they just sort of bored?
There was the Emerald Tablets. You should look into the Emerald Tablets. They kind of talk about some of this stuff, and the running theory is that the race that we're talking about, the Anunnaki, if you may, they've been called many things in different times, but if you know them as the Anunnaki, the reason why they did this was because their atmosphere was running out, and the only thing that can sustain their atmosphere is gold, and Earth is rich in gold, or richer than their planet. And they harvested humans, they created humans to harvest the gold in order for them to go and deposit that into their atmosphere to sustain their world a little longer.
So what properties does gold have that allows it to sustain that atmosphere, at least from the perspective that we're going off of?
I've got an interesting relationship with that metal.
Mm-hmm.
I used to intern, well, I could say that I still work at this place called Trax NYC, which, if some of you guys may know, it's like a local jewelry store in the Diamond District in Manhattan. And the reason why I started working there was because my boss, Maksud, he used to hold seminars regarding gold and the value of gold and the history of gold and why it's so important.
Right.
And it was all strictly, logical stuff, historical stuff. There wasn't a hint of spirituality in there. But that metal is one of the rarest metals that we have. All the elements in the periodic table are made up of variations of hydrogen and combinations of all these chemicals that are the base of nitrogen and hydrogen, all these mix in different variations to create the rest of the elements in the periodic table. But gold seems to be the rarest one. And it's also the only one that reflects the color of the sun most accurately. There's no other metal that is naturally gold.
Right.
And it's interesting that gold, despite being considered a metal, it's not really a metal. It's actually a powder. On its own, gold is a soft like dust.
Yeah, it's very malleable.
That is very malleable. So you have to mix it with other metals in order for it to become solid. And I've always been fascinated by that, because let's say that the Anunnaki need gold and they were real, right? It would just be a matter of collecting this dust and sprinkling it into their atmosphere to keep the charge going, in order to keep, if I may, the sun from burning their atmosphere. You know?
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
But
and I mean, there does seem to be sort of an ancient, and it carries over a little bit today, but definitely an ancient obsession with gold.
Yeah.
So you said that gold was one of the rarest elements on the periodic table. So when you say that, do you mean that it is genuinely the rarest metal, or it is just one?
No.
Really?
I'm saying it's one of the rare ones that people value, that people seem to be attracted to. Gold, and one of the things that I love about the Bible, that it describes scientific concepts in a very practical way. And if you read the Book of Kings, there's a chapter where it describes King Solomon creating currency for the first time. He's like, King Solomon told all the nations to bring about their gold, and from the gold he made shekels, and from the shekels he made these coins, and he basically established a currency out of all the gold. But what's interesting to me is that people were already collecting the gold. And he called them to bring their gold to make a currency. They already had it. They were already collecting it. They were already looking for it. They were already hunting it. And then Solomon comes along and says, all right, let's go make shekels. Let's go make coins. Let's go mint some coins and have an official system of currency in our empire. But these kingdoms were already getting gold.
Well, aside from the Anunnaki's relation to gold, I mean, why do you think that ancient people were so obsessed with that metal? Do you think it's because of the physical properties being so distinctive, or do you think
the reason why I think that gold is so important is because it's a highly conductive metal. It's highly conductive. I've actually had arguments with people regarding this before in my shop that don't believe that gold is a conductive metal. But gold, silver, and copper are all highly conductive metals.
No, that is true.
So that's why they use them in our cell phones to conduct the current through the motherboards. So all our phones have fractions of gold. If you get like 10 phones and you melt the motherboards, you'll have a gram of gold.
Right, but I mean, in a pre-electricity, society, I guess, where is the practical use for it? I would say besides just cosmetics.
It's you see, that's the thing. I don't think that there ever was a pre-electrical community. There was a pre-technology community, right? Mm-hmm. But we produce heat. We produce electricity.
Right.
We are the electrical beings. We produce a current. Mm-hmm. And when you study more spirituality, and you look at the concept like the aura, and you study things like qigong and tai chi, and like the energy radiating from our body, we are producing heat. We are producing electricity. And if you combine our body, our heat, our electricity with a conductive metal, it only serves to raise how conductive that current could be. So that's why I believe these princes and these kings and these ancient leaders would wear gold, because it would conduct the electricity from their own bodies.
I see.
Making them stronger in a sense.
Well,
yeah, they would eat it.
I see. So how exactly would it have those effects? Even in so let's say that it is conducive when a person holds it, essentially, or is just in the presence of it. How exactly does that cause those kinds of specific effects?
Well, I think through the process of heating it up over time. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that it applies to everything. I'm not saying go buy a gold chain and you're going to have superpowers.
Right. No.
But I am saying that if you happen to be able to get your hands on a 24-karat gold chain, which is very rare, by the way. You probably won't find that in the States.
No, exactly. Yeah.
You would have to go to like Thailand or something to find something like that. If you can get your hands on a 24-karat gold piece, the percentage of gold in it would be so high that if you do wear it and produce heat with it, it could enhance your if I may, your spiritual strength.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that when we wear crystals and when we wear like these spiritual pieces, we are setting an intention through our magnetic energy into the piece. And that piece is now radiating our intention like a battery. So if you mix that with gold, you're heightening the ability for that piece to radiate that energy, and you possibly have something that conducts a higher frequency of spiritual energy. Correct.
And
do you think that's part of the reason the Anunnaki needed the gold, was because they're very spiritual beings, so they can conduct their spiritual energy through this?
Possibly. That's yeah. I could see that. I just know that there's always been an affection for it, an addiction for it, and the reason why it's not very clear, but it is a fact that it's a conductive metal. So I think that definitely has a part to play in it. And you know, it's interesting that you bring that up, because at one point silver was considered more valuable than gold, and silver is that much more conductive than gold. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because now we consider gold literally the gold standard, but at one point silver was the standard for currency and for money and for value. And until they realized how rare gold is and how abundant compared to the gold silver was, they kept it at a higher value.
what about platinum? Because that is technically considered a rarer metal than gold, and also in that sense more valuable. I mean, does that have any kind of prevalency in cultures, or any old cultures as well?
I don't think so, because the process to get platinum wasn't as available back then as it is now.
Right.
And I think the reason why platinum is so valuable is because of the process that you have to go through to get platinum.
Well, from a modern perspective, do you think that it has more value now that it is attainable in comparison to ancient times?
Yeah. I mean, I could see how, platinum has, definitely a monetary value, but spiritually, gold definitely has the highest value.
I see.
And the reason why platinum is so valuable, it's because it's used to create things like white gold. So you come back to gold either way. The
Right.
reason why the reason why copper might be valuable is because you needed to make rose gold. So you still come back to gold. Gold is literally the floor, the ground level for value, and that goes all the way back to the time of Solomon, creating the first currency out of gold.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So, the Anunnaki create us to get gold for them, right? Is the running theory. So then, why do they leave? Where did they go? Do the Babylonians give us any answer to this?
That is. I don't think the Babylonians gave us an answer for that, but the Atlanteans probably did, and the Bhagavad Gita from Hinduism can also contribute to that. Why did they leave? That is a universal question, and you're going to see that question reflect in many ways, from Christianity to Judaism to ancient Babylonian studies to paganism. It's like, why did they abandon us? Mm-hmm. We don't know. We don't know.
So you just mentioned the Atlanteans, by the way.
Yeah, I was about to say, you can't just skim over the Atlanteans like that, man. Explain that.
That's a big point right there. But yeah, no, I was curious. I was going to mention, like, what's your perspective on the Atlanteans and that culture, and do you think that Atlantis was real in that sense?
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure. No, for sure. I think that if we're going that far back, we're not talking about the Earth that we see today. We're talking about Pangea, this huge landmass that was one landmass where all the people lived.
Right.
And I feel like the world that the Anunnaki inhibited was this huge cluster of land, not one not separate little land masses, but one cluster of land.
Right.
And in that cluster, one of the pieces was known as Atlantis. And Atlantis was one of the first places where these beings arrived. So they were the first ones to get astrology and astronomy and numerology. They were the first humans to understand the sciences.
Right.
And then those philosophies eventually spread to what we now know as Peru, and what we now know as Mexico, and what we now know as India, and what we now know as China and Russia. The land was together at one point. But when Atlantis fell, the reason why it fell was because they were practicing certain magics that weren't permitted. And the only reason they weren't permitted was because, and here's where the disagreements come. Some say that the Atlanteans fell because they started practicing a dark form of magic, and that caused their land to sink. Others say that they practiced such an advanced form of magic that they literally raised their vibration far beyond our comprehension, and they've elevated to a different dimension. Either one is, hard to either prove or deny. So, it's hard to say which one. But personally, I don't deny that there was a landmass known as Atlantis that inspired Hindu culture.
And you also, when you brought it up earlier, when you first mentioned the Atlanteans, you said that I think you mentioned that from their perspective or from their writing, it supports so-and-so claim. What writing of the Atlanteans do we have, or what perspective, or what of them do we have to use?
No, we don't have writings
exactly
from the Atlanteans. We have writings of the Atlanteans from the Hindus.
Ah, okay, I see.
And they talk about an ancient culture, like we're talking about an ancient culture,
Right.
that there was a predecessor to them. So I don't think that there's anything left from the Atlanteans, unless you count the Emerald Tablets, which if you are a believer in the philosophy, the Emerald Tablets are the only writing that we have from the Atlanteans that were given to us by Thoth, otherwise known as Hermes Trismegistus, who was the founder of the Atlantean culture. He's also brought back as Thoth in Egyptian culture, bringing back the wisdom from Atlantis to Egypt, which was eventually spread from Egypt to Greece and Greece to Rome. So if you look up the Emerald Tablets and you look up Thoth, there is a lot of mention from Thoth's perspective of the Atlanteans.
Okay.
So I know that the pineal gland plays a big part in esoteric tradition. Can you tell me what you know about that?
The pineal gland.
The third eye?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, if you ask me, I believe that the human is one of the most modern forms of technology that can possibly be perceived. Like, there's technology that we have right now that cannot amount to how advanced the human biomechanical system is. And the pineal gland, the way that I see it, as a port or a vessel, as a piece that helps us perceive this reality, but also project the reality outwards. You see, in modern science, we see the pineal gland having minimal use, only regulating melatonin levels. And when I first heard about the pineal gland when I was a kid and I was studying into it and I heard about the connection to the third eye, I was very fascinated by it. Obviously, I was very curious as to what this part of our brain is. But then when I started going to college and I got my degree in psychology and I started studying the pineal gland from a very logical perspective, and he's like, oh yeah, no, it's nothing. It's not really useful. They would say it's just used to regulate melatonin levels. And I'm like, wait, what? You're telling me that it regulates melatonin levels? And for you guys, do you guys know what melatonin is?
I actually don't know.
And melatonin it's a chemical in our brains that help us determine when it's day or night.
Okay.
So Are we when we feel sleepy at night, it's because our melatonin levels are telling us, hey, it's nighttime and it's time for bed. When we feel awake in the day, it's because our melatonin levels are taking in the sunlight, using the sunlight to determine whether or not it's day and it's time for being awake. People that have irregular sleeping schedules also tend to have higher levels of depression. And you see that there's a connection between being depressed and your sleeping cycle and this chemical melatonin, which incidentally also helps you sleep. And my interest is in how melatonin interacts with sunlight, and how our I believe it's our cerebral cortex, or our neocortex, I forgot which part of our brain that we use to produce vision. What basically happens, it's that sunlight around us, all around us, is being projected through our eyes, passing through our pineal gland, and all the way to the back of our brain. In the back of our brain, there's like a mirror-like substance that then reflects the image back out. And that is how we see the world, as a reflection of the light being bounced in and out. And that's where my curiosity starts to lie. I feel like the pineal gland is the tool that helps us quite literally construct our reality. That the reality that we perceive, if I may, is a simulation made up of everyone's perception. Through the use of this initial light that was placed in this vacuum, imagine that this being places a little bit of light in this vacuum, and then places beings that perceive this light in this vacuum. They take the light in, reflect the light out, and boom, they create what we now know as the physical reality.
And it depends on who's perceiving that reality, because every organism can perceive reality differently.
Yes.
Humans see invisible light, but it's not the only light that is available to organisms. B, C, and ultraviolet light. I'm trying to think of other animals that see in different wavelengths. But regardless, you are right about that we can perceive the world around us, but we can perceive it in completely different ways as a result. And actually, humans have the ability to basically filter out different kinds of lights, and that's why we can see the sun in the way that we do. That's under a UV filter. If you actually looked at the sun under visible light, it's completely white.
Wow.
It's not yellow or orange in the color that we normally perceive it. But going back to what you were saying, Chase, I feel like I interrupted you there.
No, you didn't, dude. I'm always interested in what you have to say.
Oh, look at
that was so nice. The first nice thing he said to me in like months.
I stop that, Joseph. So my question for you, John, is what's the connection then between the pineal gland and the opening of the third eye? What's the connection between how we perceive the world and spiritual awakening?
Well, first of all, I'm not a firm advocate of opening up your third eye right this second. I'm not. If you ask me, my personal and my friendly advice is don't go open up your third eye, please. You're not ready for what you're going to see if you do. The world will be very different. I recommend starting from your root chakra and working your way up from your root to your sacral, going into your solar plexus, getting some shit done, evaluating yourself, going through some emotional healing, being able to express your emotions through your throat, and then work your way up to your third eye. I don't advocate for anybody to ever go open up their third eye without having a balanced root chakra, because what you're going to do is that you're going to be floating up in the air and you're going to see things that you're not ready for, and that shit's going to traumatize you, and you will regret it.
So out of curiosity, what is it that you think the third eye can perceive essentially? Like, is it too abstract for you to explain?
No. You hit it. You got the money. You got it on the money, man.
Yeah.
The other frequencies that we can't perceive.
Mm-hmm.
That is what the third eye will allow you to see. Mm-hmm. We are only able to see in a certain spectrum, mm-hmm. but activating your third eye will let you see in the other spectrums that we cannot perceive.
Okay.
And that is where, in those other spectrums, that is where I believe, and where a good percentage of the spiritual community believes, including my mom, that in those other frequencies is where angels and demons and the deceased live. So by opening up your third eye, you're going to see things, very grotesque things that you may or may not be ready to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not fun to see a corpse lying right there in front of you, and you not being able to tell anybody else because what are they going to do? Is it, well, you see a corpse, there's nothing there,
Right.
and you ask the other guy, there's nothing there. They think you're crazy, and boom, you end up in psych ward.
And out of curiosity, do you think that psychedelic experiences, like through psychedelic substances, are a way to peek into that, or do you simply
Definitely.
think that they are just neurological activities that are?
You know, I definitely agree that there are substances out there that stimulate your pineal gland, especially LSD and more than LSD, psilocybin mushrooms that stimulate activity in the pineal gland. But like I said, that is not something that I advocate for because I know that most people are not ready for that.
Yeah. So, could you backtracking a little bit? Could you explain in the simplest terms possible? I know it's a very hard concept to explain. Chakra.
Oh, a chakra. It's not so complicated. The word chakra stands for spinning wheel in the Sanskrit language. A chakra is just, if you may, an energy point in the body. And
Okay.
it's where energy stimulates and circulates in the human body that is associated with certain glands. So around the sacral there's a gland, around the solar plexus there's a gland, and around the heart there's a gland, around the throat there's a gland, the thyroid, and the third eye, the pineal, and you know all these chakras, as they were formerly known in ancient times, now known as glands, serve a different purpose in the human body. So what each chakra does is that it helps establish a healthy physical body, but also developing a healthy spiritual body. You first have to understand that the human exists on three planes. The mind, which is what we hear in our heads, the body, which is the physical body that we have, and the spirit, which is that thing within us that allows us to perceive the world the way it is. It's the soul, if you may, the base essence.
Okay.
And when you realize that you have all three, and you have an alignment between the three, you align your chakras from root to crown. You have a balance between the three, producing a frequency higher than it was before, and a human more stable, more emotionally ready, and wiser than they were before they balanced themselves.
All right, before you go into anything else, I guess speaking for people who they might come into this podcast without having any prior knowledge to any spirituality, what would you recommend for somebody who is either interested or is looking into this podcast saying, you know what, I'm going to take my first steps into spirituality? What would you recommend for them to get into first? Like, what would be their first step?
To never touch a Ouija board. That's really, seriously, don't do that. No, but all jokes aside, guys, I would tell you to start asking yourself the main question. It's who am I? Who are you? Who are you, and what do you want to be? That is the most important question in spirituality. And if you can ask yourself that question and sincerely keep the mindset of searching the answer to that question, then you've got yourself a good chance of figuring this whole thing out. Because all the spiritual texts, all the guides, all the mystics, all the teachers, all the alchemists are all talking about a way that you can perceive yourself. Understanding that your spirit is a lot older than your body, and that essence that's in you, that spirit, will go on forever and has been on forever. And your job as a human is to understand that spirit and hopefully make the world a slightly better place for the other beings around you.
Good word
Who
of advice.
are you?
Who are you? I ask myself that every day when I wake
Good.
up.
You're Joseph.
What?
You're Joseph.
Yeah, no, I'm Joseph. I look like a Jew, the basics.
Yes.
Anyhow.
For-
Joseph, what time are we at?
We are at 1 hour and 19 minutes.
Let's keep going for the rest of the next 11. Let's do it.
All right, yeah, because we do an hour and 30 usually, so yeah, we got time.
Yeah. Any questions, Joseph?
I thought you were about to ask.
I feel like I had one. It just deleted me.
So
Go ahead, John.
I'm a musician. We mentioned this earlier, but you were talking about the third eye. I've never had an experience in that sense where you can open it. In terms of music and how it relates to the third eye, is it just like being able to visualize things, or does it affect all of your senses?
It affects most of your senses. And there are people that perceive things that are not physically there in a different frequency through their hearing. They're called clairaudient. Through their vision, they're called clairvoyant. Through their feelings, they're called clairsentient. It's the ability to perceive frequencies that are not perceived by everybody. That is what it means to open up your third eye. Mm-hmm. So when you become clairvoyant, like one of the things that clairvoyants mostly have an issue with, or any of the Clara people, they experience massive headaches. And it's because they're not used to being able to handle that much energy in their body. Their bodies start to produce more energy than they were producing before, and eventually they have to adapt to be able to handle that much current.
Mm-hmm. So you gave us a very stern warning earlier. Don't go open our third eye.
Well, don't start.
Which I have heard loud and clear. But is there a correct path to open your chakras? Is there a way? Is there a road to it?
Yeah, if you ask me, I believe the road starts with grounding yourself with nature, becoming aware of the nature around you. Literally going to the park, digging your feet and your fingers into the soil, and breathing in that good air. Like really inhaling in that fresh air, hearing the birds, possibly away from a city, hopefully, where you could really be in tune with nature and learn how to feel safe in your environment. If you can't go to a forest or a natural reserve, figure out how you can feel safe in your environment, and don't do any spiritual work unless you have an environment in which you feel safe. From there, work your way up to your sacral. Try to heal your sexual energy. Try to figure out what it is that you really want from this life, what you want from a partner. Work your way up and figure out what actions you want to take and where you want to go in your life. Use your solar plexus. Focus the energy there to motivate you towards a destiny, a goal, and work your way up using literally the energy from your stomach. Once you've accomplished something, if you're a musician, you wrote a song. If you have a messy room, you cleaned your room. If you want to start a business, you made the name, you got the website, something small. Take a step. Use your sacral to take that first step, and then work your way up to your heart chakra. Because as you're facing this new journey or this venture, whatever venture that may be, you're going to see that you have a lot of emotional trauma. It may be generational trauma, it may be recent trauma, it may be somebody else's trauma, but learn how to heal your own trauma before you can go help others. Once you've done that, then figure out how you can express yourself. Figure out what it is that you are, who are you, look for that in your heart, really dig into your heart and figure out who you are, and then go to your throat and communicate that to the world. Because you're going to see what you are and what you're about. That's a vision that can be shared by other people that may be in a different part of the journey, and they're more than happy to hear what you have to say. Give a helping hand and communicate your success and your failures, more importantly, to those around you. Once you've done effective communication and you see that you can express yourself well, Then you can go to your third eye. Then you're ready to perceive things that are not there. Then you have the tools that you need to be stable among some of the most horrific things and some of the most blissful things that you could possibly imagine. And by that time, by the time you've done all of that, you're a king. And you're worthy of the title because you're at the crown. You're a king not because you're better than everybody else, but because you are as good as you were, or even better than you were before, and you are helping other people achieve that level. That is what it means to be a spiritual person, to be the best damn person you can possibly be, and then helping others do the same. That is the journey.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So to sort of wrap things up, you said earlier before we started the actual podcast you had an event coming up. Could you just tell us about that?
Oh yeah, actually there's a lot of events coming up. Right now, what is it? It was August 26th. On August 29th, there is an event called Source. I'm not the host, I'm just a vendor, but it kind of comes to show where the community has come to grow. I got a whiff from one of my students who is now one of my teachers, Melanie Flores. And she's had an amazing journey, and she's connected with other communities in New Jersey that have had these conventions, these spiritual gatherings, and right now is the first time that we get to be part of it. And it's really interesting to see how the community is growing, how people are coming together. There's a culture of veganism and vegetarianism and yoga and spiritual music, spiritual rap, crystals. You see a very loving, welcoming, spiritual environment being developed. And the way that I see it, like the Woodstock of the 1970s, except for spiritual people. And aside from that, I have a full moon ritual. We host a full moon ritual on a semi-regular basis. As of September and October, we're going to have them on a regular basis. That's going to happen on September 3rd. I believe there's going to be a big one on October 3rd, and there's going to be a huge one on October 31st, happening here at our studio, the School of Mystic Arts. Aside from that, we are planning a few classes here at the School of Mystic Arts. We're going to have some chakra alignments. We're going to have some metaphysical talks, open mics. One thing that I'm personally very excited about is like the mystic dating, the mystic speed dating, where I want to gather a bunch of spiritual people and see if we can have like a nice little mystic spiritual dating situation where awesome. You get a list of questions and you ask your partner at the moment those questions and you see
Jonathan
if you jive.
Is super excited for that, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's coming, man. You'll be one of the first ones invited. I'll make sure you're there. You'll be there.
He's got a fucking shit-eating grin on his face right now.
I see that. I mean, he's met quite a few wonderful people in the community. He can't complain.
Very beautiful people. Very beautiful.
Very wonderful, beautiful people. Yeah. And more importantly than anything, the passion that I have for building this is to establish an environment when people can express their spirituality openly, where they can really work on their throat chakra and they can really work on their heart chakra without fear of ridicule. So, I mean, my vision is eventually seeing people in Harry Potter robes, mystic robes. And I see a very practical use to it. When you're dealing with oils and you're dealing with herbs and you're dealing with all these ingredients, you don't want to get your regular clothing dirty. So wear a robe, clean it off on your robe, and what better way to let that chi flow than nice, long, loose, flowy clothing,
No, that's fair. And before we also wrap up, I was just going to ask you, if you want to tell the audience what your handles are, your social media handles, so that way they can find you and follow you if they would so like.
Oh sure, yeah, you can find us on Instagram as Cielo_Mystic. You can look up on Facebook Cielo Mystic. You can go to CieloMystics.com, like Cielo Mystics with an S at the end .com for our shop, or you could just look up CieloMystic.com for our social media platform. We made a social media platform just for mystics. I have to admit, it's a project that I haven't personally given as much as attention as I'd like to, but we do have a social media platform. We have an online shop. We have a front on Instagram and on Facebook.
Fantastic.
And where's the actual shop at?
Oh, the shop is located on 321 48th Street, Union City, New Jersey, here in Hudson County.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, guys. So, well, we've completed episode 13 of the 54 podcast. I was happy to have all of you with us. So to conclude this episode, we have Chase Fry, we have Cielo Mystic, Jonathan Suarez, who I still don't know what he does, and me, Jason Cruz, your host. So anyhow, guys, it's been a pleasure, and
Thank
we'll
you
see
so
you
much,
again
guys.
for episode 14.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you guys.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much for having me.